I have made a video on abuse. I have divided the abusive behavior in four conditions. First one is rules. Second one is complaining. The third one is helplessness. And finally, the solution. So, when it comes to rules, the first thing that happens in an abusive relationship is that you find that there are rules for thee, but not for me, the abuser. And this will manifest, this will show in different ways. I've chosen a few that are typical. The first one is resting. The abuser can be on the phone, they can be watching TV, they can be talking to a friend for as long as they want, they could be taking a nap. If they do it, that's fine. If you do it, not so good. When you do it, you're going to receive a lot of criticism, blame, guilt, anger. You're accused of not wanting to be around. You're avoiding me. Well, why are you doing this? And that leads to you developing a behavior that's akin to making busy. You know, when you're in a business and the owner is watching over, and even if you don't have anything to do, you have to make busy. You have to take a broom. You have to be around. You have to be about the business. Be about work. Well, kind of like that. You can't be, resting. You can't do that. You can't be doing the same things. You have to be on standby. If you're not making busy, you have to be around. You have to be sort of always available, because if you're not, then you're in trouble. When you're coming home, this is a typical one. When you're coming home, sometimes you're aware of this, sometimes you're not, but if you think about it, when you're coming home, you find yourself as you're approaching the door, as you're approaching the street and you're driving in, you're kind of getting anxious because you don't know what mood your abuser is going to be in. Are they going to be happy or frustrated? Are they going to take it out on you? So as you open the door and you say, hi, you wait and you see if you receive a hey, and things are good. If not, you kind of brace for it. Another item is the rules around spending money. And this is not about necessarily about how much money you spend. It's about buying items without consulting with the abuser. Oh, that could lead to major problems. The idea here being is that the idea of control. How did you make a decision? How did you have a mind of your own? You thought that would be okay. However, the abuser can buy whatever they want. You will always be okay with simple things like this. You bought a new potato peeler. Sure, why not? Oh, but a new coffee maker. Sure, not a problem. The abuser is not okay if you do the same thing. The amount of money is not important. It's the consulting or not consulting. A big one is the word no. Things are okay if the abuser is going from point A to point B uninterrupted. The minute that they want to do something and receive a no or a denial, this will trigger abusive behavior. No is not a word that you want to say. And therefore, you find yourself living with a generalized sense of unfairness. This is not fair. And this is coupled with an equally generalized sense of helplessness. You feel that there's nothing that you can do to change your situation. And this leads to the next item, which is complaining. You find yourself avoiding any kind of complaints, any kind of confrontation, and instead you realize that you've resorted to withdrawing, allowing, and avoiding as your main three strategies. You hide. You hide it when you are upset. And if you're asked what's wrong, you will likely say nothing. Because complaining can lead to the following problems. When you complain, if you do complain, psychologically, you sort of have to put your hands behind your back. There's certain places where when people are complaining, protesting publicly, and they encounter the police, they have to keep their hands behind their back when they talk to the officers, because if you make contact with the officer by chance, you're going to be charged with assault. So, in an abusive relationship, psychologically speaking, you find yourself very, very carefully complaining, because if your frustration, if your outrage at what you're complaining about, remember, you're avoiding, you're withdrawing, you're allowing. One day, you can't take it anymore. You complain. Well, that day, if you make the mistake of calling a name, cursing in frustration, raising your voice, you're done. The theme of discussion is no longer what you're complaining about, however outrageous it might be. No, the tables are turned, and all of a sudden, your behavior, your despicable behavior, your intolerable behavior is the topic of conversation. The abuser is off the hook of responsibility because of that. Another item, justifications. Well, when the abuser does something, they can use a number of explanations, justifications, and they find that valid, and you may even find them valid as well, to some extent. But here's the caveat. When you do the same behavior and you use the same explanation / justification, they're not valid. That's why, rules for thee, but not for me. Those rules are valid for me, but not for you in this case. Therefore, you avoid calling them out. You avoid complaining, because somehow it's going to backfire. You don't want to do that. And this leads to helplessness. You find yourself paralyzed and taking the abuse because you've learned that doing anything else, whatever else you've tried in the past, not only it has not worked, but it has probably led to more abuse. Therapy. You may have convinced the abuser to go to therapy, only to see the therapy end shortly after. Somehow, the therapist was not good. The therapist sided with you. You talked about private issues. You betrayed the abuser in the therapy. It ended. You can't talk to friends for the same reason. You can't find supporters for your suffering, because that will be seen as a sign of betrayal. And ultimately, you can never predict what will trigger the abuser. Sometimes you can, but not all the time, not 100%. You live with a sense that, unbeknownst to you, something you've said, a joke, not being on time, you name it. This is a vast number of things. You can't quite predict what will trigger the abuser, and you find yourself walking on eggshells. Finally, the solution. I have 5 items. Number 1, you have to deal with your shame, and also the shame that you receive from those who are triggered by your lack of change. People, you trust people, you tell them this is going on, and they expect you to do something. They expect you to basically leave the relationship, as if that were easy. And that generates a lot of shame. you need to deal with that. Um, and you deal with that by going to therapy. And here's the thing about therapy, because therapy can become threatening in a situation of abuse. Therapy in a situation of abuse, and I would say in general, therapy is not, at least not at the beginning, a call to action, like your friends. Okay, what are you going to do about it? No, no. Therapy is a call to reflection. Um, it's a call to help you reflect and let your brain find a solution, find a way out, if there is one. And unfortunately, I am saying if there is one because life is not a Hollywood movie. For a number of situations, conditions, you may have to live for the rest of your life in a managed abuse type of situation. That would be perhaps your best solution sometimes. And therefore, this will generate shame. And we need to talk about it. But things like children, finances, your love for the abuser, these are very powerful barriers to change. We need to deal with that. But finally, do not stop fighting internally. For those who remember, there is this movie, The Color Purple, and it depicts a young woman, a young black woman who is receiving abuse. There's a scene in this movie that I've always remembered, and the abuser is sitting down with an acquaintance, and he asks for a glass of water, the acquaintance. And the lady goes to the kitchen, pours the water, and looks when nobody's watching, spits in the water. And then we see the guy taking the water without even saying thank you and drinking it. And she is savoring every single second of that. She's fighting internally. So sometimes, even if you can't speak, fight internally to keep alive and seek help.